Jim Rollins, Director of Public Works.
Bart Clark, Project Administrator.
Stratford, Finance Director.
And so we're here today to present not just to the Board of Selectmen, but to all members of the public who are here in person and joining us on the live stream, or maybe even a recording later on, to talk a little bit about the state of the town's roadway infrastructure as it currently has been in the past, as it currently stands, and where we might be able to go into the future. So with that, we have quite a bit of material to get through with you tonight, and we'll dive right in. And we'll start with a historical review. So, through a myriad of different circumstances, that includes past resident, staff, elected official decisions that have been made. They've led to minimal investment in the town's infrastructure. I don't think there's anybody here who's driven on town roadways or have seen the state of them who can say that every street that we have here in Winstead and Winchester is in pristine condition. We know that we have some work to do, and it's these minimal investments that have led to the state of some of these roads. For example, in fiscal year 2014, so that's the year spanning 2013 into 2014, an infrastructure presentation from the then town manager remarked that preventative maintenance investment. Oh, sorry.
You probably need the microphone.
Yeah, the microphone. We'll pass this around as we go along. But back in fiscal year 2014, it was remarked that preventative maintenance investment has been insignificant, roads showing the results of years of neglect. So over time, things have changed. In 2016, we did conduct a paving assessment study that was performed to identify conditions of roadways, and that study identified that approximately 70% were in either somewhere between a failed and a fair condition, and only 30% were in a good or an excellent condition. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those numbers mean, what that scale looks like as we go along in this presentation. In the years since, the town's been working diligently to make much needed investments with limited funding at its proposal. But it's because of this limited funding that we've only been able to make as much progress as we had. Progress has been marked, progress has been visible, but it's still slow. So what you have here in front of you, and it's difficult to see from the audience, it's difficult even for us to see here on the computer. It's a lot of work that's been done between fiscal year 2015 and fiscal year 21. And certainly as we go through the slides, I know our Director of Finance here will chime in to talk a little bit more about specifics. But you can see, and the reason I wanted to include this master list, even if it's hard to read the individual information while you're sitting here in person, there's a lot of work that's been done in that time. We're talking only about really the last 6 years here, and it's a wall of labor that's really gone into the engineering, the actual paving itself, a lot of planning, and certainly a lot of time. And we'll talk also a little, and as we look at these projects, I want to make sure that everybody has a visual representation of what has gone into making the roadway improvements that have occurred in the past 6 years. So in the 2015 to 2018 range, this is an entire look at the town. All of those little colored dots that you see throughout the map, those are all different improvements that we were able to make along the way, or that we've had the opportunity to have the gas company make on our behalf. And we have also a closer look here at Winstead itself. This is Winstead 2019 to 2020. You get a little bit of a sense, or Winchester, you get a little bit of a sense of the different roadways that have been done just in the last 2 years alone. Quite a bit in and of itself, but there's a lot more to be done. And then, this is the zoomed in version of Winstead. You can see here, this is what was done in the 2015 to 2018 range. And then more recently in the 2019 to 2020 range. Again, that's a number of colored lines. That's a lot of money, time, and investment that's really gone into these roads, but there's a lot more that aren't colored. I don't know. Either of you would like to speak a little bit about some of the data.
So the 2-page chart that had all the roads listed
this summarizes that. So the blue bars represent work done during fiscal 10 through fiscal 15, that 6-year period. And in terms of road projects, we had 6 projects underway, but in the last 6 years, 16 through 21, the orange bars, we have had 52 projects that were worked on. On the right side, you see that we did 2 bridges during the first 6 years of the 12-year study or accumulation of costs and projects. And in the last 6 years, we've done 10 bridges and culverts have been worked on. So quite a bit more work done in the last 6 years compared to the previous 6 years. So this tells you shows you the funding levels for again, comparing those 2 6-year periods. The blue being fiscal 10 through fiscal 15, and the orange being fiscal 16 through fiscal 21. Town dollars spent, $600,000 in the first period, over $4 million in the second period. Grant monies received, $949,000 in the first period. In the second period, $4.4 million. Totals are $1.6 million in the first 6 years, and in the second 6 years, $8.7 million. So it gives you an idea of how much more work has been done recently compared to the first part of the last decade. So different kinds of treatments have different costs, and as well as different projects have different costs. So you see that this shows you the spending or the investment by fiscal year. And really, our largest investments came in 2019 and 2020. And a lot of it is in the bridge and culverts. And so the big orange bar in 2019 was the state repairing or replacing the Halliburton Bridge. That took almost $3 million of state money. And so that was a big improvement there. The bridges and culverts that involved in 2020 was Lansing Road culvert, and then the Sucker Brook Bridge. Again, a lot of money was, and both of those were, we received grants from the state for that. So the gray bars are work on pavement, and quite a bit of pavement work was done in 2019, again, also 2018, 2020, and in 2021. So the blue is engineering work. There's engineering going on every year. They can't do the other work until the engineering's done. And you might see a little bit of an orange part of each bar, which has to do with drainage and other work. So, but that gives you the composition or investment by fiscal year. Now, there are different treatments. These are the primary treatments involved in the road work, and both Jim and Bart can explain this. This has to do with the costs per mile. And HIPAR, or hot in place asphalt recycling, is a very economical way to go. It works out to about $85,000 per mile. And shim and pave is another fairly economical treatment, $96,000 per mile. When we go to mill and pave, which involves taking more of the surface off the roadway and recycling it, that's up to $202,000 per mile. And when you have to reconstruct a road, the costs get very expensive. Now, this bar on the right this is based on the actual projects that we took place over the last 6 years, and we had only a few projects that involved reconstruction. And was it Overlook Road? Yeah. Overlook Road was the primary one there, and there was a lot of drainage involved. So that reconstruction involves drainage costs. That was a road that pretty much had to be, the drainage had to be fixed on it, and then before the the road could be reconstructed. So those costs could be as high as $1 million per mile, but we think, you know, we're working with something maybe half of that. That sounds about.
It depends.
Yeah, that's right. It really depends on the individual road circumstances. So, but what we're trying to do, or what Jim and Bart are trying to do, is plan the road work so that we avoid reconstruction whenever possible. We don't want a road to get that bad because we know that it becomes cost prohibitive. The next one just shows you the number of miles that have been able to be treated in each one of these treatments in high par, hot in place, asphalt recycling. We were able to do it just over six miles that 1 year that we did that. Over 3.7 miles for peel, shim, and pave, and then 3.28 miles for mill and pave, and just a very small amount of reconstruction, which was just about a half a mile. That's what's been done in the last 6 years. So I think those gives you an idea of some of the nature of the road repair work that was done over the last 6 years.
So that covers some of the past conditions, and now we'll talk a little bit more about what the present conditions now look like.
Sure. So you've got two pie charts up in front of you. The one on the left is what our first pavement assessment showed. And if you look, we've got 2% of the roads are considered completely failed. 50% of the roads were in poor condition. 17% were fair. 26% were good, and only 4% were excellent. So through the actions of the town, we took our pavement assessment, and the first thing that the engineers recommended was routine and preventive maintenance on the roads that weren't failed, so that you would slow their deterioration down, hoping that we'd be able to catch up on, you know, some of the needed work before those roads needed to be completely reconstructed at very high cost. So we started off kind of slow in making progress, but we finally gotten through that first stage of real just taking the low-hanging fruit, the cheap stuff, and slowing deterioration, and started working on the lesser roads. So our next assessment was in 2019, and we had doubled the amount of excellent roads. We'd cut in half the amount of failed roads, and then we significantly improved the roads that were good and the roads that were fair, and significantly cut the roads that were poor. So the trend is in the right direction. Keep in mind, we went after the low-hanging fruit on this, so the progress was pretty fast and relatively inexpensive. But, you know, it's slow, but it's moving. So we've made a lot of progress, but the roads that are rated failed and poor are here rated 1 and 2 and 3. On this slide, we have rated, you know, those that are rated 1 and 2. Now, keep in mind when you see these roads up on the screen, some of these roads are only partially failed or partially poor. It's not necessarily the entire road. But you can get a pretty good idea of what's rated 1 through 3, and that's where the big money costs are. You can do maintenance on, you know, the 4s through the 10s or 9s, but the 1s, 2s, and 3s are a lot of work. So we also have, it's interesting, the title of this presentation was about the roadways, and that's because the roadways are more than just the roads. We've got roads, bridges, culverts, signs, guide rails, drainage. There's a lot to it, swales. But bridges are a very significant cost, and they take you know, several years from start till completion. And they break down the roads into two categories, those between 6 feet and 20 feet spans, and then on the right is the column where the bridge spans are more than 20 feet. And the reason they break those up into two different columns is the funding sources are different. The state local bridge program takes care of the smaller of the two bridges, and they have a reimbursement rate of roughly 50-50. The federal local bridge program is the state administering federal money, and they pick up 80% of the cost. The town picks up 20%. So we're leveraging our money somewhere between, 5-to-1 and 1-to-1 by doing bridges, and that's one of the reasons we're able to get these things going, is because we have some cost share. Whew, sidewalks. Who wants to take on this one? Sure.
So, town law, that's between the charter and the ordinances, it requires that the owner of the property immediately abutting a sidewalk is the person that is supposed to care for that sidewalk. And is generally responsible for both its maintenance in terms of snow removal, ice removal, etc., and its replacement. Presently around town, I'm sure that everybody here has an anecdote about some particular site. There are many sidewalks that are in disrepair with not a lot of action being taken to remedy that failure. And so in instances where these sidewalks connect major public facilities, such as our schools, such as our main street, such as other emergency shelters, just to name a few, the board may need to consider whether that current practice is acceptable, of hoping that our ordinances and that our charter are going to be followed in this manner, or if there's some more greater action that needs to be taken. On the item of drainage, I'm going to ask Jim to jump in if I misstep. But in a number of places around town, Hollyburton Ave and Oakdale are really just a couple examples. Drainage pipes are in such bad shape that they're collapsing, they're causing sinkholes, and in other places around town, there's no drainage to speak of. And in many cases, this causes property damage. In some cases, this causes environmental damage, such as around our lakes, our natural resources. And so as we move along with our roadway repair, as Jim pointed out, it's holistic. And we're not just looking at roads, we're looking at sidewalks, we're looking at drainage, we're looking at all of these different components that come together. And drainage really has been a feature of that. But of course, as with all of the things that we've mentioned tonight, more investment is needed in order to greatly and markedly improve drainage in many of these areas around town. And now I'll ask on Bruce's expertise to jump in if I miss anything on these couple of funding slides that we have. Federal funding is available for a lot of specific projects right now, but road work isn't necessarily eligible under a number of programs, including the American Rescue Plan Act. You heard us talk about that tonight regarding fire apparatus, regarding some of the other items, economic development, social services, and it specifically does not permit us to spend the $3.1 million that we acquired on road work. Build Back Better grants can't be applied towards this. The coronavirus relief funds cannot be applied towards road work. So the federal infrastructure bill, I'm sure that there may be questions floating around about what that's going to look like for the town. At this point in time, we don't really know how much of that money is going to be passed directly on to municipalities. We don't know how much is going to be allocated towards road work. And the reality is that this is a federal infrastructure bill. This is not something that was passed by the state of Connecticut that's likely to have municipalities in mind. There's a lot of federal roadways, I'm sure, that we all have in mind that are of concern, that they have failing bridges too, they have failing roadways, and those items need investment from their perspective. The likelihood that a lot of this money will go towards municipal roadways, I would say that those odds are pretty slim. So the town is pursuing as many competitive grants as it can. Certainly, we already touched on a few of those grants that are offered through the state and federal bridge program, and there are more. There's a LoCIP program. This is through state funding. That's the local capital improvement program. And there's LOTCIP, which is the local transportation capital improvement program. And both of these items have provided the town in the past with regular funding, and will continue to do so, we hope, with the authorization of the state legislature, to make sure that we have some supplemental dollars to be able to put towards our roadways. But we've been tapping into these resources over time. These are known commodities to us, and we've been putting every dollar that we can towards those roadways, towards the work that we've been describing to you tonight. And this is the progress that we've been able to make as we've been able to demonstrate it to you. And there's still a long ways to go. So looking forward, there are a couple different approaches that we can take to progressing our infrastructure to a new phase, to an improved phase. Currently, the town's approaching road repair through what's called pay-as-you-go. That means that we're taking money through our regular operating budget, we're putting it towards roadways, and that money's getting invested just as quickly as we can. In some cases, that means we need to do engineering as preliminary legwork. In some cases, that means we already have something ready to go, shovel ready, and we can get asphalt on the ground. This is really a slow pace approach. There's a small amount of money that's dedicated to infrastructure with each annual budget, and that's the amount of money that's able to move forward. So there are some pros and cons to all of these different methods, right? To any method that you might try. The pro in this case with a slow paced approach is that it provides the town with slow and steady progress on road projects. It's tangible, you can see it, but the con is that it's slow. It could be hindered in any given year depending on how the board and the public view infrastructure investments, how taxes are viewed, whether a tax increase needs to be made in a given year. There are a lot of different ways that the budget can be impacted as we go forward. And it's not something that produces widespread, highly visible results very quickly. And lastly, it's a very inefficient way to fund your larger $1 million plus projects, and I'm sure that Jim and Bart can name a few off the top of their head. Yeah, that would be pretty large, and maybe we'll get to naming some of those in a second. But for those larger projects where we're only allocating several $100,000 every year in the operating budget, we can't fund one of those larger projects in a given year with the amount that's currently being allocated. So then there's the fast-paced approach. That means putting greater investment, greater amounts of money, greater amounts of time into infrastructure that can help us achieve quality roads in the next 10 to 15 years. Continuing with that slower pace approach requires, as you saw, over 3 years, there was some improvement, but the improvement was marginal, it was modest, and we expect with our projections that we would need a minimum of another 30 years of investment before real progress is made that could otherwise be made with a greater level of investment, that fast-paced approach. So we're really here today, as we started out, to pose a few questions to the Board of Selectmen for your consideration, and so that you have an opportunity to discuss amongst yourselves and with members of the public really where public opinion is on these items right now. We went from extremely minimal investment pre-2015 to a light to moderate pay-as-you-go approach post-2015. Obviously, that's an improvement. The question is the public satisfied with that current rate of progress? Another question is, how do we plan for the next 5 to 10 years of road improvement? And lastly, do the selectmen agree with the sentiment that our infrastructure requires increased investment in order to restore roadways in a fast-paced manner? So that's a lot for you all to digest right now. Certainly we have a few proposals for next steps and outreach that we would like to do in the event that the board would like to hear more about greater investment in roadways, more of a close look at a fast-paced approach to that investment. We welcome any questions that you have about our presentation at this time, and I certainly welcome any further comments that the rest of our team here has to make.
If you can back up one slide, Josh. One of the things we have to remember is we've definitely made some pretty good progress in a lot of ways, but we absolutely went after the low-hanging fruit. The area that is causing, the biggest amount of problems and cost is the drainage aspect of these projects. Investment in drainage is really a great investment because that's what keeps the roads from deteriorating, is if you have a good, dry, solid road base. So we definitely have made some good progress in the last 5 or 6 years. The low-hanging fruit, the less expensive treatments. We start going after the bigger roads, you know, the Elm Streets, the Case Avenues, the Hollibirds. You're talking $1 million to as much as $4 million maybe for Hollibird by the time you put it all, everything in there that has to go. It's, you know, so you're looking at real money coming up. We've been putting small money in, and so if you're happy with the pace we have now, that's only because we've been going after the less expensive projects. Once you start throwing in an Elm Street, you're going to say goodbye to chip seal. You're going to say goodbye to crack seal. You're going to say goodbye to, you know, shimming and paving, because there's zero money left, and it would take 2 years just to do Elm Street. So I just wanted to communicate that point so you have a point of reference to make your decisions on. That was it.
Thank you. Any other comments from the team at this point? That's our presentation, folks. We'll take any questions that you might have. Questions?
Can you tell me what's going on with Bridge Street right now? I mean, I saw a four-wheeler trying to get up Bridge Street, and it's the water. Is that a drainage issue that's going on that's not resolved? Because I saw them doing work there before.
Yeah, okay, so I couldn't quite hear what you said. You saw
Sorry,
what?
Sorry, my problem, sorry. So I watched a four-wheel truck try and get up Bridge Street, and he barely made it up. I know there was work that was being done there before. What was being done?
Okay, that's a great question. So Bridge Street, for those that aren't familiar with where Bridge Street is, there's an intersection where Bridge Street goes straight up from Main Street.
Point. Bridge Street meets Route 44.
So it comes up off of Main Street, and it crosses Prospect and Depot and Willow Streets. And right where the road starts to get steep, just past the intersection, there is water that bleeds out of the ground and then this time of year freezes. So we dug that up. We believe there's an underground spring there because we've... And
then that also in front of the liquor store. That's a whole other...
That's another one. We don't know the source of that one. For a while we thought it was drainage coming from behind that wall or the resident's property, but they did some repair work on it and they looked into it, and that doesn't seem to be the cause. Again, it could be just a spring surfacing. That hillside is really wet. So we actually cut across that road on Bridge Street where you're talking about, and put in a drainage pipe, and we thought we had it, and the water just comes back up.
Right.
Usually for a couple of weeks here in the winter, you'll after you get a rainstorm, you'll get it bleeding through. Then as the ground freezes, it locks it up, and we don't have a problem all winter, but there's these transition times, and we don't know what to do with it, and we haven't invested a huge amount of effort because that intersection has a whole design and reconstruction configuration that we're working on, so it just doesn't make sense to put all your...
I just know that the work had been done, and then I saw this, I'm like, wow.
We really hoped that drain was going to do the job. I mean, we put a perforated pipe all the way across the road, and it just bleeds out just below even below the drain, above the drain, everywhere. We don't understand it.
Right. Go ahead, Candy.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that, you know, in your next steps, you know, from all of you, I think we should keep going. We've been talking about this for a very long time, and I think we should have you know, at least get some proposals out on the table of what it will look like, and be able to react to, you know, the concrete examples included and whatnot going forward into the new year, and either move or don't move, because we've been, you know, working so hard for so long, and that, like you said, those $1 million roads are coming up, and there's no way to do it within our current configuration, or if we're going to wait and nobody wants to move, you know, go faster, then it will have to wait.
Yeah, I guess my comment would be, first of all, thank you for all this information.
I know it was a lot, but
No, I'm not saying it's a lot. I'm saying it's very helpful. So
Okay, good.
I'm glad for it. When we tell people, you know, we're working on a roads plan, and we've been telling them that for 2 or 3 years now. You know, the question is, from them is, you know, where's my street on the list? That's the first thing they want to know. And then when you start talking about all the needs we have, it's like, oh, how much? Okay, so those 2 questions. I think the first one that needs a little more work for us is what I think you're intending to do, and what Candy and Candace are talking about is, what does it look like? Jim, you talk about the low-hanging fruit and how easy it is to do that, and how the tough roads that need reconstruction, you know, eat up the whole budget. So it seems like there's got to be some sort of balance in there. We can't just do $1 million roads and potholes and all the rest, you know. So hopefully what you give us in January and beyond is what does the list look like in your opinion, and then we'll make the decisions on where we go from there. But appreciate all the work that's gone into this so far. We're on the right we're on the right road.
Josh, can you bring up slide 14?
You got it.
As this goes out to the public, I just want to make sure that everyone understands the gravity of the work that needs to be done. So from 16 to 21, we've done about a little under 14 miles.
That's correct.
Our paved roads are 80 plus
80.
miles.
about 76 paved and then a few more dirt.
Okay, so we'll just talk
Yeah.
about the paved.
But how many are not in excellent and good? So what's the non-excellent and good mileage? Because we've only done 14 miles. So what's left? Because if they're excellent and good, we're not going to be addressing those right away. We're going to be addressing all the others. So what's the other mileage
Okay.
block?
But yeah, I just want to make sure that, you know,
I
we've
understand
done,
it's 14 miles.
we've made great strides, but there's a lot left to do, and I want to make sure people understand that. And the other question that I have is on slide 19. Lanson Drive was just done, correct?
Yep.
So we've got that listed as an 8, not a 9. Any
So,
particular reason?
yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question. The bridge ratings are a little confusing. The way it was explained to me by the DOT bridge crew when I asked that exact same question, and they said, well, the minute we sign off on the final inspection, it's a 9. It's never going to be a 9 for another
kinda like driving
day
a car
after
off
that.
the
It
lot.
just goes to an 8. I think that must be how they must be like a tracking method they have.
Okay.
It's
So
a
it's-
used car then.
It's right. Maybe that's what it is. There you go.
Yeah.
So that explains
Okay.
why both West Road and Lanson are still 8s.
Okay.
Yep.
I applaud you for all the effort in putting this all together. It's been a long time for us to kind of come up with a presentation that we think can go out to the public and really get their feedback. I think that's the most important aspect of it, is really communicating this to all the people so they really understand. It's not a Board of Selectmen decision. It's a town decision. And so that's really one of the most important things. You know, we can look at how to finance it, but the judgment and the vote is in the hands of the townspeople. It's I'm looking forward to, you know, getting the options out to the residents and having them really chew on this and see where we go from here.
Anyone else? Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Bart. Bruce?